Julian McKenzie writes about hockey for The Athletic. He does an excellent job, and he's also written a book that's coming out in February called Black Aces, Essential Stories from Hockey's Black Trailblazers. And for that book, he interviewed a lot of people, including Jarome Iginla, Grant Fuhr, Sarah Nurse, PK Subban, George Laraque, I like that one, Anson Carter, and Blake Bolden, who's a friend of the show. He interviewed a lot of others. Now, before I get into the book, this idiot in the other studio mentioned Sidney Crosby and Alex Ovechkin.
What did I do? I was editing something and I heard this idiot in the other studio.
Like, I was in a good mood.
Julian.
I was happy. And then you happened to mention Sidney Crosby, and now my whole demeanor is gone. And this brings me to something that I wanted to mention in A Block. The National Hockey League, who continually stuffs this guy, Sidney Crosby, down our throats for the past 20 years, has done it again. The NHL PR department, who has a Twitter account, posted this. Sidney Crosby scored his 10th and 11th goals last night. It took him 15 goals to score 10 or more goals. With those 15 games, it's the third fewest games to reach double-digit goals for a player aged 38 or over in NHL history.
You've already lost me. These are getting so specific.
Like, what are we doing here? Stop! I'm sorry. I just had to get. I had to get that out. All right, back to the book, Jerome.
But your question for Julian was, do these two hate each other?
No, that's not my question. I just want to get off my soapbox.
Oh.
I just wanted to get that out there. So, Julian, what inspired you to write this book?
I'm confused about the hate for greatness of Sidney Crosby.
Greatness.
It's a thing. It's been since the show existed.
A lot longer than that.
We need to unpack this because, like, as a Canadian who, obviously has watched the Crosby versus Ovechkin battle as long as those two have been in the league, like, I've grown to appreciate the rivalry. The fact that we have guys in the league at their pedestal who we could pit against each other, who have also had their place in North American sports mainstream culture. Like why are we hating on what we've got going on here? It's like the 99th time these two guys have met, including the playoffs.
No.
Like, this is great.
It's not the matchup. It's Sidney Crosby. That's what it is.
You just don't like Sid.
I don't like Sidney Crosby.
My thing with Sid.
So you're just mad about 2010 then?
That's exactly what I was just gonna say.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm still mad about 2010.
I'm
still mad about 2010.
I'm mad about more than that.
I'm still mad about 2010. I'm also mad about the 3 cups he's won and how they shove them down our throats and stuff. But for me, it all starts and ends
You're wearing
with 2010.
a Panthers hat.
Of
You
course.
have 2 cups. You have back-to-back cups.
That's
Yeah,
something
but that
I
just
love.
happened.
That's something I love.
Listen,
Like, that's great for you guys.
And
You
I'll
should,
be
who
honest.
cares?
I'll be honest,
Yeah.
Julian. When he comes down and brings us a 3rd straight,
that's not happening.
it's gonna be
That
like,
is not
it's gonna be like
happening.
the Brad
Get
Marchand
that
all over
thought
again.
out of your head. Ethan.
No, you're not getting me in on that. We get enough trouble on that on the Chris Johnston show with that. Don't do that.
Listen,
Nope.
like Sidney Crosby was drafted 20
Yes.
years ago.
Yes.
Beforehand, the National Hockey League stuffed him down on. He was the next golden boy. It was almost like
He was living up to that promise. What did you want him to do? Not do
I want
that?
the league to showcase other players in this league, not have this guy show up on my TV 18 times a season for no apparent reason. They didn't even make the playoffs last year.
Okay.
Yeah, but they're
If we
first
want-
place
if-
in the East right now.
If we want to have a genuine discussion about this, like
I don't.
I could.
That's what you have to understand about Roy.
Mike has been dropped.
That's what you have to understand. He
Back to
doesn't
the
want to
book.
have a genuine conversation.
All right, I'm good.
What I want to know is,
No. This
Okay.
leads me back to my original question. What inspired you to write this book?
All right, what inspired me to write Black Aces? I just thought it'd be really cool to write a series of profiles on important Black hockey players. I was approached with an idea of writing a book in August or September 2023, and the idea came to just came to my head. I was in the shower one day and it happened, and then I had the opportunity to approach a couple different NHL players and female hockey players and ask them if they'd be willing to be profiled, and that's what led to Black Aces being a thing. Getting an opportunity to speak to Jarome Iginla about his career and talking to other people about Jarome Iginla and his career. like Sidney Crosby. Sorry to tell
Oh,
you.
come
Sidney
on,
Crosby's in the
man.
book.
Any excuse to drop his name. Good grief.
No, but seriously, to get the opportunity to write that book and to write these profiles and to get other people to speak about their legacies and all these other different stories about them, I wasn't sure if we had ever seen like a project of that size. We've seen other books where, you know, maybe 2 or 3 players might get profiled, but I think we've reached a point in the league where black people, there's been so many great players who have come over the last how many decades and have made an impact. It was just cool to have that opportunity to write about them. And even if, you know, not every single player is mentioned in this book, I've had people for the last how many weeks say like, oh, was this guy in it? Is this guy in it? Is this guy in it? I still hope people get something out of the people I profiled, and I know you mentioned some of the names off top, but I hope people enjoy stories from guys like Tony McKegney, Blake Bolden, I know was mentioned, but Kelsey Kozler is someone else. I think people will be really interested in learning about, or Dante Abercrombie, who's in charge of a hockey program at an HBCU. I hope people enjoy those stories too.
Not giving the book away, but you talked to all these people. What was a particular story that you believe would be eye-opening?
I hope people who aren't familiar with Herb Carnegie take something away from that chapter. For those who are not familiar, people regard Herb Carnegie as arguably the best black hockey player to never make it to the NHL. And yeah, there were opportunities, so to speak, but I think once you read the book and you understand further context, you'll know why ultimately his dream didn't happen. But I think the story that resonated with me the most, there's a story where he was, I want to say he was really young. He was in his teenage years, and he was playing for a local team that happened to be practicing one day at the Toronto Gardens, and the Maple Leafs were playing there at the time. And Conn Smythe, who at the time ruled everything with the Toronto Maple Leafs, he's watching from a distance. He's watching Herb and his teammates practice, and the story goes that Conn Smythe got an assistant coach to talk to Herb and tell him that if the Leafs could find a way to turn Herb Carnegie white, they'd find a way to put him on their team tomorrow. Like, that's a really messed up story to hear. And while doing research for the story, I came across an interview that Elliot Friedman from Sportsnet did with Herb Carnegie, where he's talking to him about obviously his life in the game of hockey, his career over the last how many decades. And when they discuss that moment where Herb is being told by that coach about the story I just told you, he gets emotional. He almost kind of lashes back, and he full on breaks down in this interview. So I really wanted to talk to Elliot about what had happened, and he was just so shocked about being there for that moment, and obviously feeling emotional. And I hope that, you know, people read that story and get an understanding of how good Herb Carnegie was. I mean, the name of the book is Black Aces, and I thought if I were to do that book and not have Herb Carnegie, who was considered a black ace when he played on an all-black line while playing semi-pro hockey up in Quebec, like, what are we doing here, right? So I felt it was really important to highlight his story, and I'm especially happy not only that his story is in there, but the way that chapter ends, where you're highlighting all of these other different firsts from black hockey players. It meant a lot to write that chapter.
Man, that is a backhanded compliment, and that backhand literally slapped him in the face.
That's
terrible.
It's hard to hear.
Yeah.
Julian, the names of the people that you spoke to, I mean, you talked about Herb Carnegie. Roy mentioned a bunch of more present guys, Jarome Iginla, PK Subban, Grant Fuhr, obviously, 80s. So what I'm framing is you talked to a lot of different people from a lot of different generations, right? Did you notice, like, the storyline, the experiences improving as we got more current with players, or has it been more of a steady pace of just unfortunate and I'm having trouble just like coming up with the right words, but did the way that the players of color were treated evolve as you spoke to people from newer generations, or has it been kind of a straight line of not good?
I would say that there's definitely some sort of evolution. The biggest thing I would think with some of the younger, newer generation players, like even someone like PK Subban, for example, who like I consider that as like my era when I was still a fan of a team. That was a player I was like, yeah, like I want to be like that guy. PK Subban, when he enters the league, there are players who look like him that he could look at and be like, yeah, like I'd love to be like, for an example, Kevin Weeks. He was at his camp once upon a time, right? Or other guys who came up from Toronto or Scarborough or any of those neighboring areas. He could always look at for examples. When you think of guys like Jarome Iginla or Grant Fuhr, there were fewer examples of black hockey players. Like Jarome Iginla specifically had mentioned a few times that there would be people who would come up to him and be like, "Yeah, you want to play, but like there's no black hockey players. Like what are you doing?" Right? Like I think the most interesting thing is seeing the younger generation of players enter the league or want to play hockey, but they know that there are other examples that they could look at. Like Sarah Nurse, like looked at Georges Laraque as an example. Like she's someone like, oh yeah, wow, like that's someone I could play as in NHL video games. But also even to bring it to the women's side too, like I also have to mention like Angela James is also in this book.
Yeah.
Now, this is someone who I needed to have profiled. This is someone I was not able to talk to directly, but I was still able to get so many people to speak about her legacy. But we're talking about someone who was arguably the best at her sport at a time when you could barely watch it on television. And for someone like Sarah Nurse, they would have loved to have known who she was like as a player. It took them years after the fact to realize who they were, but they were still able to watch women's hockey on TV during the '02 Olympics when that started to become more and more of a thing, right? Like I would say, and maybe this is a long-winded way of answering the question, but I think the biggest thing to point at in the evolution of older players to younger players, it's their influences and players who came before them, the examples set before them. There's a lot more of that in some of the younger players compared to some of the older players profiled.
All right, Julian, big question here. The book is called Black Aces. There's a very prominent black ace on NHL television right now. Did you talk to Anson Carter about whether he gave himself the nickname Ace?
So I'll tell you this. When I initially interviewed Anson, we talked about a lot of different things, and the nickname did not come up. But someone tweeted at me like, hey, you should get the nickname in. And I thought, well, you know what? It would be cool to see if we can get the nickname there. Not as maybe I mean maybe it's a spoiler, maybe it isn't. It's not that elaborate of a story, but it is mentioned very briefly how the nickname Ace came to be for Anson Carter. It is very
I'm
briefly
hanging on the
mentioned.
edge of my seat right now.
It's
Did
very
he
briefly
give it
mentioned.
to himself?
I think you got to read the book to figure
Oh,
it
there
out.
it is. There it
Just
is.
to figure it out. I
Oh,
will read the
I
book
saw that
just to
coming
figure
a
it
mile
out.
away, man.
Absolutely.
I'm
Absolutely.
gonna let that hang.
John Cooper calling him out the other night was really funny.
I thought
that
was
made me
so
think
good.
of it. That made me think of it.
That was so good.
At last check, there's about 7% of players of color in the National Hockey League right now. It feels like just above 50 players. We're looking at this at a grassroots depth here. What are some suggestions that you might have for the game to grow to bump that number up?
You have to find ways to make the sport more accessible. I mean, I think that's a pretty easy place to start. You look at other sports like basketball and soccer, you don't need nearly as much to get into those sports in terms of an entry cost. And also, if we're talking about black people getting into those sports, it gets so much easier for black people to see themselves in the NBA or to see themselves playing soccer, even Major League Baseball to a certain degree, just in terms of just the players that they've seen come before them, but also the cost. Like in Canada, there was a point, I don't know if it's still the case, it might still be the case, where like you could spend as much putting your kid through hockey compared to like if you wanted to put them through like equestrian or horse jumping. Like these, like hockey is seen, it's obviously seen as the sport in Canada, but there's so much that goes into buying equipment and putting them into registration for certain programs And if your kid is really good, are you putting them in a high level training program year round or different parts of the year? Are you letting them, pursue their opportunities to go play major junior or pursue the collegiate route? Like, there's so much that goes into putting your kid into hockey that it just you get priced out if you are not a family that could afford that type of lifestyle. Like, even hanging around in NHL locker rooms where sometimes I'll talk to players and sometimes you'll hear them discuss like the cost of putting their kids into hockey and buying stuff for them. Like, it's
not cheap.
Like, I get it. If you make a certain amount of money, like you're not thinking about it that much. But like if you're on like close to a vet min, you're thinking about it a lot more, right? Like making 750, 1 mil, like you're thinking about that a lot more even. The fact that we're at that point is really surprising to me. But I think the fact that there are initiatives where you think of people like the Hockey Diversity Alliance that are trying to make it a little bit more accessible for people of color to get into the game. Obviously, there's the Player Coalition that the NHL started as well. They're trying to do their work too. I think it's a combination of making the game affordable, but also accessible, and having players of color, having people of color see people who look like them who are playing the sport, and letting them know that there's a possibility where that culture can actually accept them, which brings us to a whole other thing about just the discussion of hockey culture as it is, right? Where there's a lot of gatekeeping. Unfortunately, there's a lot of discrimination still that persists, and it doesn't make a space like hockey all that welcoming for people who look like you and I, Roy. So I think a lot of that has to change. It's a lot of systemic changes that have to happen.
In terms of growing the game, building off what you were just saying, how much do you think it helps that not just there are players that look like you on the ice, but when young fans are tuning in to watch on TV, they see guys like Anson Carter breaking things down. They can go on to social media and see a Kevin Weeks breaking the biggest stories in hockey. So you would think that that would also help kind of open the game up for a lot of people, not just the ones that are playing.
Absolutely. And if you are someone who recognizes from a young age that you might not want to, or you might not feel you're able to play hockey at a high level, the fact that you're able to see a David Amber on Sportsnet or Hockey Night in Canada, a PK Subban on ESPN, or Anson Carter, as you mentioned earlier, or even if you look at more like regional broadcasts, right? Like Devontae Smith-Pelly's done a lot of stuff on regional broadcasts, for example, or Jean-Luc Grandpierre has done work for the Columbus Blue Jackets, for example, or back in Montreal, Georges Laraque hosts his own radio show and talks about hockey. Yeah, like it's so many different guys who have made their names in that space as Black hockey players who have found ways into the media space. And I think that could totally resonate with young people who, if they don't see themselves playing, maybe an opportunity to cover the sport as another way in. And I'll go one step further, Mike Grier as GM of an NHL team. I've always been the belief where, yes, it's good when you get people who are featured on air or on ice in this instance, but if you get more people who work behind the scenes, that is a huge key. So seeing a guy like Mike Grier rise up to become a GM of the San Jose Sharks, seeing someone like Brett Peterson become an AGM with the Florida Panthers after being a player agent, or Eustace King, who's a player agent, or John Osei Tutu, another player agent. Like, it's not just Black hockey players or Black referees. You got to mention Black referees too. Like,
oh yeah,
the impact of Black people on the sport of hockey, it's there. It's apparent, and it shouldn't be something that people have to go sifting through and looking for. It shouldn't just be a thing where, if Black people decide we're going to go to a hockey game and we watch a game, we're just be like, man, it's just these white boys fighting each other. No, we exist. We're in this sport. There's a presence of us. It shouldn't. And the more that's shown at the forefront, the less of a surprise it is for everybody.
I was going to mention the executive level with Brett Peterson being the assistant GM with the Panthers and the GM of USA Hockey, with Mike Grier being the GM at San Jose, with Kim Davis being the executive vice president in the league office. And there's this one. There's the Boyd family. Dr. Joel Boyd is the Wild team physician. His entire family's in this sport. His daughter Kendall, by the way, Seattle, probably the most progressive team that we have in this league.
Yeah.
Kendall is the senior vice president of finance with the Kraken. Kyle Boyd is Seattle's senior director of fan development. And Casey Boyd also coaches youth hockey in Seattle. So my original question was going to be, do you believe there's going to be an uptick of people in color in the executive branches in the NHL and its member clubs.
I think the fact that we have presences already, there I wouldn't be surprised, right? Like whether with executives or even behind the bench, like we've seen guys, we've seen an influx in talented black people make their way in those realms. I definitely think we're going to see an uptick. How big of an uptick? That's a different question. Whether slow though or fast or however whatever pace we go at here, I think the fact that there is going to be something to look at in terms of progress is still significant. Like, how long until we talk about Joel Ward as a viable head coaching candidate, right? An assistant right now with the Vegas Golden Knights. Like, that's someone who could easily be in line for a job if an opportunity opens up, whether through expansion down the road or some other opportunity opens up. I mean, we know how few and far between these coaching jobs are and how long the lifespan is for certain people. But I think we're definitely going to see some sort of uptick, whether it's a slow burn or maybe it's at a different pace. And that has everything to do with the people who are in place, but also the path that it takes for people to get there. Think of guys like Dante Abercrombie, as I mentioned before, working at Tennessee State, who got to work with a guy like Graham Townsend, who worked as an assistant coach for the Leafs as a skating coach. Like, the fact that a path is laid out for certain people, expect more people to take that path.
And finally, is there a moment in time in the National Hockey League where you can point to that you can really say that hockey is really, quote unquote, for everyone? Or has that feeling not happened yet?
That's a good question. I think there are moments, small moments, where people of color can look at the game and maybe feel a little relieved and say, hey, you know what? Maybe that is a good moment. But I think there's still so much to go. There's still so many ways to go, right? Like, I think of a guy like Jabril Toure, who during a preseason game with the Ottawa Senators in the rookie tournament, he gets into a fight with a couple guys on the Leafs. His helmet comes off and a do-rag is on his head, right? Like, that's not something we're used to seeing. And to see people be pleasantly surprised, like I remember talking about it with George Laraque and Devontae Smith-Pelly about it. They were pleasantly surprised at the reaction that people had, where it was overwhelmingly positive. And of course, there were negative comments to come. That's the next step in all this. Like, we have to find a way to see fewer and fewer moments like that. But I think the fact that we're seeing more and more people, at least it feels like that to me, we're seeing more and more people be open to that type of progression. That leads me to think that maybe we're starting to get to a better place, but there's still so many ways to go in terms of the sport being truly for everybody. And I think it's cool that there are people actively working to make that happen.
Yeah, and this brings a memory for me. It wasn't not 30 years ago when for the first time ever I saw, and this is when Anson Carter grew his hair and George Laraque wearing dreads. Never seen that in that sport before, and I'm sure nobody else has.
That's like, seeing stuff like that. It matters to people, and people get on and say like, oh, well, why do people care so much about representation and blah blah blah, whatever? But like, that stuff matters. If you see it, you can believe it, right? Like, I'm sure you've heard that before. Like, that's something that matters to people. And like, I think of Anson Carter. You mentioned Anson Carter, dreads. I think of him at the 2003 World Championship, scoring that overtime game-winning goal for Canada, beating Sweden. Like, that to me is a hockey moment that I will remember forever. I was at my grandmother's house. She has a TV. She had a TV upstairs. I was watching that alone. The review was super long, like 10, 15 minutes. Like, I think it's the longest review that's ever been done for a goal like that. But like, the speed, the wraparound, everything, like, that is a moment that sticks in my brain. And one of the most vivid things I remember is Anson Carter celebrating and his dreads just like flowing. Like, stuff like that matters, I think, to a lot of people. It should matter.
That kind of leads me to the last thing I wanted to ask you about, because we've been talking so much about growing the game and influencing young people. How did you get into the game of hockey? Because you're obviously extremely passionate about it, and you have a vast, wide majority or knowledge of the game. How did you get into it, Julian?
I'm from Montreal originally, and that's a city that considers hockey a religion. you go to school, like growing up as a kid in elementary school, all your friends are talking about hockey. You turn on the TV, even if you don't have cable, hockey is on. Like I watched a lot of hockey on CBC. Being in Montreal was super weird because in the early days, when if you were trying to watch on a certain channel in English, because obviously Montreal and Quebec is super French, for whatever reason, they weren't going to show a lot of Canadians games. They showed you a lot of Toronto and Ottawa games. So I watched a lot of that growing up. But if I wanted to watch the Montreal Canadiens, I'd have to watch in French. And as I got older and I continued to learn the French language more, I watched a lot of French language broadcasts where you'd watch the Canadians. And that's how a lot of people, a lot of Anglophones who happen to live in Quebec, who might not know the language as well, that's an easy way for them to learn how to speak French. Like that helped me out a lot with learning how to speak French as a kid. So I think a lot of that had to do with my upbringing, the fact that hockey matters so much in the home city I'm from, and the fact that, I don't know, just I embraced it for what it was because everyone around me embraced it. And even if my family members were not always the most like devout hockey fans, like my dad and I will watch hockey on TV sometimes together. My grandfather, he immigrated to Canada from Jamaica, and he ended up being a Boston Bruins fan. Like he didn't see himself in the Montreal Canadiens fan base. He saw himself as a Bruins fan. Like hockey has just always been a big part of my life, and it has given me so much as a journalist and a soon to be author. So yeah, it's just always been a big part of the video games. I didn't even mention all the NHL video games I play as a kid. Like it's just been such a big part of my life growing up. So yeah, it's just I think it had a lot to do with everything I was exposed to growing up.
Black Aces: Essential Stories from Hockey's Black Trailblazers. That comes out in February. So please go and get Julian's book. It is going to be a good read for everybody. Julian McKenzie from The Athletic. Thank you for joining us.
Roy, David, thank you so much for your time.